Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvo Vahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishvavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may Brahman sustain us, may Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings, and may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Welcome everyone to our evening satsang, the arati we have just accomplished in the first half hour of our evening. And now we move on to satsang, and since it's not possible for all of us in our widespread sangha in SRV associations to be together on Tuesday nights, or ideally every night for satsang, because if you had a group together and we're living a dharmic life together, then there would be ongoing events like that happening every day, mostly at early morning meditation, and evening at dusk we'd have arati and satsang, and then weekend classes and various intensives or retreats that we'd also give. So we try our best to do that throughout the year, but for these periods where the sangha is widespread, not only on our island but across the United States and around the world, then we've been able to come up with this solution, as it were, to bring us all together in the live stream, like a stream of consciousness. There's a technical version of that too we can take advantage of. So that's what we're doing here tonight, and which we have been doing for the past few Tuesdays whenever I'm at the SRV ashram in Hawaii. And so people send in questions, and those questions have arrived before me as I walked in the door tonight before Arati. So we will get to those questions and their answers and see where that takes us. Again, we'll be missing the discussion part of this, because in satsang people can ask questions in the midst of the answers of other questions, so it gets more involved and more satisfying, but we'll work with what we have and take these questions and these answers. One of the local devotees here on the Big Island writes, I don't understand the statement from the Upanishads that says the soul is divided and subdivided hundreds and thousands of times, like the point of a hair, as shown on the Nadi chart. Can you explain this? Well, she's referring to the chart that we took last Sunday, that is 2 days ago, when we were live streaming, if you were present, on the lokas, that is the various worlds inside of us, and the various nadis, or nerve flows, that is nerves or nervous system, which is not just a physical nervous system as the human being shows us when you dissect its inside, but there's another type of inside which is inside of our mind and inside of other worlds, other lokas. And those nadis are streaming through and carrying energy called prana, and psychic prana, and even Shakti power, in the case of peoples whose nadis are purified and who are flowing easily within themselves, and carrying them in these various phases of what's called the transmigration of the soul. Of course, from the Advaita Vedanta standpoint, there is no transmigration of the soul, so we would have to borrow some terms from other philosophies like Tantra and so forth, like Leela, or dream play, or shadow play, Chaya, as we were talking about last Sunday. That is the soul playing with various forms and taking them on and dropping them, not only just in death, but even while it lives its daily life, it's assuming different forms, like the teaching and meditation, for instance, that father of yoga, Patanjali, gives us, is that the mind is constantly taking forms. So in your dreams tonight it takes forms, and while you're in your waking state, while you're walking around, it's taking forms. For instance, if you walk outside and you're going to go someplace and you look at your car, your consciousness just took the form of a car. Or it takes the form of a toothbrush when you put that in your mouth this morning when you're going to freshen your breath for morning. Or anywhere your consciousness falls, it takes on the form of that object, that thing in which it is seeing. Or even takes on subtler forms like attitudes. You get in that car and you go driving and your mind is already projecting your arrival at a place that's some 50 miles or 60 miles away. So your mind has taken the form of your destination. So Father of Yoga and other great seers and sages before and after him have spoken to us about cutting down that tendency of the mind to take forms and trying not to take forms at all, which would be meditation, right? You're trying not to think because the thought process is what's taking your consciousness and modifying it into different objects. So you resist that tendency called sankalpa, or that desire to play with objects all the time in your waking, dreaming states, because in deep sleep it's been noted that you don't play with any shapes or forms there. You don't even play with time there, because time stops in deep sleep, at least as far as you're concerned, as long as you're in it. So that taking on of names and forms in time and space in its cause and effect loop is a good teaching to bring up in the context of this question, because what has actually happened is your consciousness is flowing along nerves, a nervous system. We know that happens with food, and its energy is that the 5 pranas take food to the organs, or make us breathe in and hold our breath and breathe out. Hopefully consciously we do that, instead of just by habit. Or any flow of the 5 pranas that you study about in basic yoga or in the healing arts of India, like Ayurveda and so forth. So we know that happens in the outer world, but then we're not really cognizant of those flows of prana that are going along subtle nerves in the inner world, in the world of our mind and our thoughts. So making your mind more aware of that is tantamount to opening up that nervous system, that inner nervous system, and those are called nadis. The yogis are aware of this, and when you breathe, for instance, if you come to a teacher of yoga, and I'm speaking more of all 8 limbs, not just one limb, like say just pranayama or just asana, but if you're looking at the whole thing as a complex and comprehensive system that you want to learn, and you come to a teacher of Ashtanga Yoga and they get you breathing, then what you're doing physically and subtly is opening up nerves, aren't you? You're opening up your nervous system. You breathe physically and practice that, and your lungs expand, and nerves are forming, and energy is being transferred better to your mind and to your brain, that is, because mind and brain are 2 different things, connected but different. And so in that same way, there's a kind of expansion going on that opens nerves and lets energy flow through it. Well, you have to understand too that your mind is the same way. It has a kind of nervous system, the nadis, and they flow into different centers of your being. Heart, throat, third eye, and crown are the upper tier, and then down below at the base of the spine and the organs of reproduction and at the stomach, at the navel. So all of those nerves, there are 100,000 nerves, the Upanishads say, and that's what she's saying here in her question. And she says about it, she doesn't understand the statement that says that the soul is divided and subdivided hundreds of times. Well, of course, we're not talking about soul with a capital S here, Atman, or Brahman, or Chaitanya, or Buddha nature, or the soul, the ultimate soul, the supreme soul, the Paramatman. That's not divided, of course. It never divides. It's one continuous whole. It's one homogeneous mass of consciousness, as the Upanishads themselves say. But we're talking about the self that is the conglomerate of all of these subtle nerves and centers inside of it, the kingdoms of heaven within it. That is divided hundreds and thousands of times. So if you make that one distinction, you can see how accurate the statement is if you apply it on the right level. For instance, somebody was talking about distraction, and I was saying that the Tantrasists have a word for that called Shatavadana. It's one of the evolutes of Maya. Shatavada means thinking of 1,000 things at once. Shatavadana. So the mind that is not controlled, not focused, that is not disciplined, is not one-pointed, is not centered, is not peaceful, is not equanimous, that kind of mind that's fragmented and restless is thinking about hundreds and thousands of things at once. So why wouldn't it be fragmented into all these parts? Why wouldn't it be like a hair that's divided and flowing everywhere? So that's not a positive thing. We're talking about a mind that is ill, that is habitually ill, and comes into the world with that tendency and leaves the world with that tendency, and so is caught in this samsaric loop, which is, again, filled with hundreds and thousands of nerves from here on down. It's going in a direction that's more toward the animalistic nature rather than more towards the heroic nature or towards the divine nature. And so that's what spiritual life wants to do for the devotees. It wants to reverse that animalistic, called pasu, that tendency of moving towards animalistic preoccupations. Animalistic can be lustful and angry and all that too, but it could even be just like the animals. They're just focused on the earth and eating, and that's all they do. They don't really have any other occupations than standing in a field and eating all day. And so that's also kind of a direction that the human being wants to move away from. The human being's more noble, so it wants to awaken these subtler nerves and move into these upper trajectories of the kingdoms of heaven within, and occupy those stations and stay there, abide there, until it finally can abide in the Atman, and then all the different hundreds and thousands of splits of that, the end of that hair, will end for them. They'll flow all into one ocean. All those rivers of current, of pranic current and psychic pranic current and Shakti and all that will flow into one great ocean or one great reservoir, and all transmigration will end. So I've talked about the lower tier of that, and I've talked about the upper tier of that just now. Basically, the fragmentation, you can say the self is split into many hundreds and thousands of parts, divided. So it's spreading itself thin amongst everything it does, just like a person in everyday life gets restless and goes from one thing to another in a frantic way. Frenetic activity, it's called rajas. And so they are very tired at night, and their dreams tend to also run like that. And they don't even get reflection from their sleep. They just dream all night, and they don't go into deep sleep very much, where all of that ends. So they have this constant cycle of tamas and rajas, if you know what I mean, going on. That's the lower end of the spectrum. The upper end of the spectrum is where all of these hundreds and thousands of subtle nerve endings meet and flow into the heart, as the famous Upanishadic chant tells us, Ara Eva Ratanabhao Samhatra Yatra Nadyaha. It's out of the Svetashvatara Upanishad in the very first chapter, like the hundreds and thousands of nerves that meet in the heart, like the spokes of a chariot wheel at the hub. So somebody did their inner homework and looked inside and saw these centers. Ramakrishna talks about them also in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Saw these various centers and saw all these nerves, subtle nerves meeting at different points, and saw souls gathering around those different points, hundreds and thousands of them. And so some of them going towards samsara pragbara it's called, and some of them going towards kaivalya, freedom, kaivalya pragbara. So he, of course, would want to abide in the heart and help those who are flowing away from the heart in a outer trajectory only, help them turn everything within and go and rise up and open the heart chakra and open the throat chakra and open the third eye chakra so they can have higher and higher vision and reach the goal of human existence, which would be enlightenment in that case. So there is another sort of middle tier then that I'm speaking of right now, of that hair that's subdivided into 100,000 points. That is that soul. It also divides itself amongst all the worlds. And when it lives, when it dreams, when it passes from the body, even when it meditates and it thinks and it considers and it imagines and it fantasizes, it's spreading itself around all these worlds that are available to it in its thought process. So in those three ways you can see, one of them negative, one of them neutral, you might say, and one of them extremely positive or non-dual. This sloka makes very good sense to us, that the soul, the relative soul, can divide itself into hundreds and thousands of different points. And it can move there and experience the end of that point and come back, just like going from waking to dreaming, and then come back to the waking state, and then move out again. And it can spread itself over these nadis in these various lokas. So this is what the questioner is speaking about here on that chart we had Sunday, which is entitled Lokas, Nadis, and the Transmigration of Souls. So probably the confusion is coming from the fact that this person has learned the non-dual Advaita and knows that the coming and going is all nonsense. It's the way Vivekananda put it. It's all dream life. It's non-actual. The soul is in one stationary point and never moves. That's the Supreme Soul. So you wouldn't apply this sloka to that Supreme Soul unless that Supreme Soul decides of its own will to take on a body and to come down from this supreme place into these lower centers, out from the kingdoms of heaven within to the kingdoms without, and begin to play and sport there, or begin to help other beings. And it's doing so in a conscious way. Even then you could apply this sloka to that great soul who decides to take on. Isn't that soul is not taking on all of these worlds in a fragmented way, is he or she? That soul is taking them all on purpose and trying to, like Christ and Buddha and Chaitanya and Krishna and all, is trying to help all beings. Loka sangraha, it's called. Loka, there's that word again, the worlds. Trying to help all beings, bring the highest good to all beings. Loka sangraha is a Sanskrit phrase that's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita by Sri Krishna. He has the highest benefit for all human beings in mind when he embodies. So you could say that's a fourth way in which a great soul could divide itself into 100,000 points, because he's meeting 100,000 souls, isn't he, in his life? So he's meeting them consciously, in a conscious way, and trying to bring benefit to them. So his consciousness is taking on the form of you when he sees you. Your consciousness may be taking on the form of the car and the table and the dog and your illness, or whatever wherever your mind goes, but that great soul is taking on the form of thousands of beings. And that's an avatar or a great realized soul. So in 4 different ways there I've tried to explain how this sloka could apply, but one of them, of course, it won't apply. That's where all the subtle nerve endings meet in the heart, where the Atman abides and everything dissolves there, and that's the end of the play, that's the end of form, it's the end of manifestation, it's the end of expression, and everything is just one indivisible mass of pure conscious awareness, is how it's described to us by the seers in the scriptures in words, as far as words can tell. So, good question, and it brings up lots of good information and teachings around it. Let's go on to some other questions then. What's that I hear? I hear someone else asking a question from far away. They say, would you explain what Swami Vivekananda means by sarva mukti? Well, as I studied the scriptures in my youth over 40, 50 years now, and looked into them and found great souls like Swami Vivekananda and all the letters he wrote and all the lectures he gave and all the people that he influenced in his life. And also the great monks that followed him that I learned from. I heard over and over again that word mukti. And then I started to think probably there are different kinds of mukti, that freedom can't just be one. It's sort of like Sri Ramakrishna is saying, don't call me a master, because it assumes that my spiritual growth has ended. And he said it's impossible. Spiritual growth is infinite. I mean, you might have noticed that growth here in the world is infinite. You could spend forever in this one world trying to learn everything that it has, and you would never do it in countless lifetimes. By the way, don't get caught doing that too long. Try and find this higher wisdom. That too is infinite, so you should never think that you could master it all, but you should take those highest and best points of higher wisdom and meditate upon them and transfer them or transform them into definitive realization for you, a state of enlightenment. So in that way, different kinds of mukti or different kinds of freedom are there. One of them is called krama mukti. It seems to be that, although some schools differ in their interpretation of it, it seems to be a kind of gradual enlightenment. I think Sri Ram even mentions it in the Adhyatma Ramayana when he says, enlightenment dawns on the mind of the human being by stages. So krama mukti would be, it wouldn't be very acceptable to the Advaitists, for instance, to the non-dualists, because they say sarva mukti would be the term to get right to your question, because sarva mukti is that everyone's enlightened all the time, or you can enlighten it that everyone is headed towards enlightenment, as the Vedanta says, and nobody will be left out of the picture, because the human being is divine. So every single soul will get enlightenment consciously. Some of them will take a long, long time to do so, but they can't do anything other than that, because that's their true nature, is enlightenment. Enlightenment isn't something you get in a post-mortem emancipation or in some distant future lifetime. It's something that's abiding like that, like at the hub in the heart, like all of those nadis are merging into the heart, into the ocean. That ocean is eternal. And all souls are flowing towards that. They may flow away towards other trajectories and distant points and lower levels of consciousness, but they will bounce back from that and turn in, and everyone will have to make that return journey to the heart, to the ocean of consciousness, because that's all it is. That's all that exists, is the ocean of consciousness. Everything else we just said is dream life, right? So dreams have to end, and you have to wake up from them. So a dream of 100,000 lifetimes will end in waking up in Brahman, in the ocean of consciousness. There's a story, speaking of Sri Ram, that this crow, I think Bhushandi by name, angered him. And so Bhushandi ran away thinking Ram was going to kill him because he had angered Ram. And see, he was a very clever crow. See, he could do lots of things. And so he went everywhere to the different worlds. He went along these nadis, all these different inner nerves, and took his consciousness and went to different places and hid. But Ram was always there, finding him out. So finally he could find no world and no loka or no nadi where Ram wasn't in Ram's consciousness and Ram didn't know about. So finally he just turned and faced Ram, and Ram grabbed him, put him in his mouth, and the crow thought, this is it, I'm dead. And so Ram put the crow in his mouth, and Bhushandi thought he was being eaten, and all of a sudden he opened his eyes and he was back home in his own nest. So that Ram is God with form. Actually, that leads us into the next question, which I'll talk about in a second. But that ocean of Brahman is the formless, and Ram would be the form. They equate to about the same thing, really. All forms will end there and merge. So, back to krama mukti then. Krama mukti is a gradual enlightenment towards that realization. You'd say that probably the greater percentage of human beings are moving in that way. They're thinking, oh, I'll get enlightenment tomorrow, or I should learn meditation next year. It's something I've always wanted to do. And the hound of heaven is running after them and barking at their door every once in a while, and it reminds them, oh yeah, I should be doing my spiritual practice, or gee, I should have read the Gita last year, I didn't, So there's always reminders that of the divine reality coming back on people's lives, and they are moving slowly in that way. That's Krama Mukti. Now there's another Mukti that's more for the intrepid soul, you might say, is called Jivan Mukti. Jivan is the embodied soul, the Jiva. The apparently individualized soul, we call it in Vedanta. So from Krama Mukti, you'd say maybe move to this station of Jivan Mukta. The Jivan Mukta is a being who is wanting to get liberation in this very life. When I met my teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, I felt like I had met a Jivan Mukta. So a being who is liberated and free of all attachments and desires and centered in the self, had every indication of being enlightened and so forth, and was that way for decades, and into his 90s. Didn't change at all in that respect. It was always that one stable Shiva, that one stable eternal soul. So Jivan Mukta would be, as I said, for a soul who's hankering after or deeply desiring freedom in this lifetime, is not happy with the things of this world. Sometimes I've said that our children, some of our children, even in the West, seem very disinterested in the world, and so we think there's something wrong with them. They wouldn't think that usually in India, or places where spirituality and monasticism and souls getting free was happening more often. So some of those people over there in their samskaras, their mental makeup, as we say, and over the generations that have come, have an idea of this idea of Jivan Mukta, or getting free from the trammels of life, the vagaries and vicissitudes of life, they call it. So we would, if we found a child born to us who is not interested in the world, that could be a very good sign. And don't need to necessarily give them some sort of a drug or some medicine that you think is going to make them more focused, or try and get them more interested in the world by getting them married early or something. That would be a worldly person who tries that. So what you want to do is get them, look into their mental makeup and see what does interest them. And if you looked into the mental makeup of a Jivan Mukta, you would find that what interests them is getting free of form, getting free of names, getting free of attachments and preoccupations, and getting free of mundane human convention that's all around them, in society, in religion even. They're interested in spirituality, and that's the one thing. And Christ knew it. He said, "Thou shalt know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." So these beings are interested in the truth, and they're not finding it in the everyday channels, in the mundane human conventional sense. So they're having to look other places for holy company, for instance. Like we just did our arati, and now we're doing our satsang. They're looking for circles of people who are coming together, who are discussing the truth, so that the truth can set them free. All right, so then that explains a little bit this turn towards Jivan Mukta, or Jivan Mukti. A Jivan Mukta would be somebody who has attained Jivan Mukti. So now you have those, a kind of a tier there, don't you? You have Krama Mukti, and you have Jivan Mukti, and now you have Videha Mukti. There's 4 of them actually that I've heard of and considered in my own meditations. Videha Mukti means, Deha means bodies, so it would be freedom from all bodies. So this person is interested in not only getting free, but staying free and never coming back into form again. This soul is an exceptional soul. There have been people who have tried to pit one against the other. Who's greater, the Videha Mukta or the Jivan Mukta? The Jivan Mukta, will get free and then will turn to help others. The Videha Mukta will get free and then see that it's impossible to help anyone. Everyone's already Brahman. So how do you compare two beings like that? One being comes back to help people out of a dream. The delusion of finitude is how it's said in some songs in India. The other person just looks and said, oh, they'll get free when they're ready to get free. I'm just going to stay free myself. You see, it's really impossible really to say who's higher, the Videha Mukta or the Jivan Mukta. We tend to, in our own position, in our own suffering, in our own lives, in our own limitations, we tend to look at the Jivan Mukta, probably the equivalent in Buddhism would be the Bodhisattva, and say, we like that person because he's coming back to help us. But when he or she does come back to help us, we often bite the hand that feeds us. We turn away from that person. Even the Christ people turned away from. See, I mean, the greatest soul in the world could walk up to you, and if you're not ready to be awakened, you're going to be antagonistic to their help. And that's why they would turn away and say, oh, I see I can't strew pearls before swine. You'd say, you're calling me a swine? See, and get all bent out of shape. So anyway, that Videha Mukta level is a very high level because it sees freedom, and you can see how it is going to bridge on what you brought up here. A questioner brought up Sarva Mukta, or Sarva Mukti. Sarva Mukti means enlightenment everywhere. The Videha Mukta probably has the highest and best chance of realizing Sarva Mukti in whatever way you want to define it. I'm defining it in two ways. One way is that everyone's already enlightened and they're just pretending they're not. They're just dreaming themselves away from enlightenment, and the hound of heaven is galloping after them. You see, after them, trying to convince them, and they will waken up to their eternal freedom. Because remember, Vedanta, that's the beautiful facet of Vedanta everyone likes, especially in the Judeo-Christian upbringing they've had here in West, and around those fundamentalist teachers that say, you know, you're going to hell and so forth. As Vedanta comes forward with a fresh view and says, your nature is divine, your nature is not sinful. So everyone will be enlightened. Why? One, because enlightenment is their true nature. Two, is because everyone wants freedom. Some people are just stealing the goods of others because they want freedom. Some people are cheating on their taxes because they want freedom. Some people are doing ignoble acts because they want freedom. And that's how Vivekananda put it in his life. He said that everyone is really seeking freedom. Some are seeking it by the wrong means. But really, what's at the basis of everything is they want to feel free. That's the most exhilarating feeling of all. And of course, any kind of bondage, attachment to intoxications or substances or objects or money just will not compare once you've tasted a little bit of that freedom. So that's how I see it, basically, if I were to give 10 minutes or 15 minutes to the subject and talk about Krama Mukti, gradual enlightenment, Jivan Mukti, getting free in this lifetime, Videha Mukti, getting free in this lifetime and staying free and not ever coming back into form again. Have no hope for me for the world forevermore. I'm gone and gone forever, as the Song of India sings. And then this idea of Sarva Mukti, which Vivekananda brought up. And there's where I would have to split that hair into two. I'd have to say, one is that everyone's already enlightened, or two is that how Vedanta puts it, everyone will be enlightened, will find their way to enlightenment without exception. Birds have nests, foxes have holes, you have no place to lay your head here, is a very profound statement when you meditate on it. It's clarifying some issues about you if you have this preoccupation with animals and so forth. You're going to have to make a distinction between yourself and an animal. That is, the human being can act animalistic, but it can never be an animal. The human soul is noble and divine by nature. And do animals transmigrate into human form? Maybe it's a moot point. Maybe we should not spend so much time there. Maybe we should just concentrate on our own divinity, because if we do, we'll be able to liberate everything. Animals, insects, worlds, people, angels, your ancestors. 14 generations of your ancestors in either direction will get enlightened if you can get enlightenment in this lifetime. That's how they say it. So putting our attention on a great principle, like Sarva Mukti, as Vivekananda said, is a wonderful meditation. So I see Mukti in a sort of four-tiered way now. Krama, gradual, Jivan Mukti in this life, Videha Mukti, forever, and Sarva Mukti, everything is enlightenment. Everything you're looking at is an expression of Brahman, or freedom. Thank you for that question. Third question here. Vedantic teachings state that the Jiva and Ishvara are coexistent. If you have one, you have the other. Would you elaborate on this? This has been used at times to explain the need of worship. But if one prefers formlessness and the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, can this step be skipped? Well, in relation to everything I've just said, I'd probably say I wouldn't advise it. I've often also said you need friends in high places. In your understanding of the teachings of non-dualism, as that begins to mature in your mind over time, which is a kind of krama mukti thing, isn't it? I mean, it's not like, oh, I've heard the truth and the truth set me free right now. He said, you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. He didn't say, we'll set you free in that moment. You'd have to be a very exceptional soul to hear the truth. Thou art Brahman, and immediately get free like that. Isn't it going to take most beings time to think about that? Well, my teacher said, I am one with Brahman, that the Jiva is Shiva. I think I'm going to have to think about that. Let's see, how long is this going to take me? A month, 6 months, 12 years. I have to consider this non-dual teaching before it sinks in and really transmits to me the deepest level of that teaching in the most profound way. So, in that way, we're saying here, in that 12-year period while you're considering the non-dual truth, you might be visiting in your meditation some other lokas, flowing around different nadis into different centers, right? You're meditating when you say, I and my Father are one. That's up here, see? That's in the crown chakra. But in the meantime, you're down here saying, hearing the truth for the first time. You've just barely penetrated the ancestor realm, and you've arrived at the realm of the divine devotee. So the devotee who loves God has arrived at the heart chakra. He's penetrated the Vishnu Granthi, the knot right there between the ancestors and the devotees, and he's arrived there. So now that he's there, and is he going to immediately jump to the crown chakra? No, probably not. He'll probably be taking some years to meditate on this center. So when he's at this center, the devotee, he or she, he will be having experiences at different centers, won't they? These striving souls, these aspirants. So some of those experiences they're going to be having are going to be with forms of Ishvara. Gods and goddesses are forms of Ishvara. And they're closer forms than human beings are, most human beings. So are you going to skip those experiences for some non-dual realization? Or are you going to have to come back down, you see, down the steps and find out these things that you left out, you see, for a more fuller realization? Sri Ramakrishna himself said, you can jump from the lowest step to the highest step if you're a good high jumper. But you'll always wonder, I wonder what those middle steps were like that I didn't traverse, you see. I wonder if there were any real steps there at all. I didn't see them when I jumped. So your knowledge is left incomplete. So you come back down from that and you encounter these other steps. Ishvara, the Trinity, the 12 spandhas of Shaivism, all the way down to the gods and goddesses, down to the celestials. You come down through these nadis, through these lokas, and you have experiences with them in meditation. So, no, I wouldn't advise those as being skipped. I would say this, that some beings can skip them. More power to them if they have the power to go into formlessness and they're okay with that. That's sort of a rare soul. And I would say this on top of that I wouldn't advise most souls try that. Sit in meditation for 8 hours a day. and try and go formless. I don't think it's a good idea for most Western practitioners particularly, because they will have to come back and visit these other steps. Also, the tendency of religion is to pull the rug out from under people. Say, oh, you don't need ritual, you don't need forms, you don't need the gods and goddesses, you don't need this. But Holy Mother told us people have been getting spiritual growth for centuries, for millennia, through puja and through worship, and you want to do away with it in your non-dual realization? So you can see that evinced even in the Ramakrishna orders today. There's just one or two ashrams that are non-dual, and the rest are all for the people, for the masses. You'll go there and you'll hear teachings from the swamis, you'll go there and you'll see pujas going on, you'll learn how to do puja and take it home and do puja at your own altar. Is some high and mighty non-dualist going to look down at you and say, oh, that's lower, you don't need that? See, what kind of spirituality is that? You need all of those steps, and you need to know, to be a consummate devotee, you need to know everything within you, kingdoms of heaven within you. Every chamber of my Father's mansion you need to visit and see what it's like if you're going to be an architect. If you're going to be a spiritual architect, you need to know the mansion. So these are all things that come up in regard to this question too. And basically, we don't want to pull the rug out from under people who are moving along trajectories on the krama mukti type of level, gradually. See, we want to give them all the time in the world because that's all they have is time. And they can then make an inward ascension type of style, they can begin to fill out their wisdom and get greater realization over time. And so there's also rather a risk of just jumping from this chakra, from awakening, you might say, to the crown chakra, to formlessness, because they say the seventh chakra has a disorienting power to it. When you first enter into it, it's so vast, so filled with light, so formless that most beings don't know where they are. It's also going to take meditating on for quite a while in order to orient yourself to formlessness. So, yes, practice formlessness, practice having samadhi, move towards the non-dual position. But as far as skipping things or Xing things out of the equation, you don't burn bridges, especially if you need to come back. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, a bird flies very high in the sky, but it always has to come to rest on a branch somewhere before it flies high again. So those branches that the soul comes to rest upon are the Ishvara form. See, are the forms of Ishvara, or God with form. They're very beautiful, very high, very peaceful, and very fulfilling. And they're also resting places for the soul who's still trying to get himself into samadhi of a nirvikalpa kind, or of a sambhagata sign. Yes?
Did you address the first part of that question about Ishvara and Jiva being coexistent?
Yes, the first part of the question states, Vedanta teachings say that Jiva and Ishvara are coexistent. If you have one, you have the other. So that pretty much answers the second sentence. I mean, you'd say yes. Jiva Ishvari, Jiva is Shiva. Shiva is the Ishvara form, and Jiva is the human being. So Jiva is Shiva, is the realization that one arrives at in tantric practice. So they coexist, and they're really no different than one another in essence. In magnitude, yes, there would be some difference, but in essence, they're the same. So I used to say that most people think that, they're the center of the universe and they're trying to find Ishvara somewhere. But Ishvara is actually this huge pillar of light, and all universes and all beings are rotating around it, like planets are rotating around a sun. So that Ishvara is the pillar of light, and all beings are trying to find themselves in relation to it. And when they find themselves into relationship in the proper way, then they have love of God, devotion to God. And they realize that they're just, as the Upanishads say, sparks off of the fire. So that's some elaboration on that. And I've already said something about the need for worship. Therefore, if you have this desire to deify form, not just renounce form or reject form, or probably should stay away from aversion of any kind, like aversion to form, then you're going to want to take a divine form and worship it with flowers, with incense, with sandal paste, and called puja and so forth, or mass. You're worshiping a great form like Christ, or a great form like Vishnu or Shiva. Then that's the sweetness of bhakti, is right there in your participation. Krishna calls it in the Gita the best of all physical austerities. Some people might think, oh, fasting's a great austerity, but Krishna says, no, the best austerity is to bow down before the shrine and do worship there. You're taking your body and you're making it what it is, an extension of Ishvara. And so it should start acting like Ishvara, right? You're cut in the image of God. That's a qualified non-dualistic statement of Christ. You're cut in the image of God, because God has no images. God's formless. So you're talking about the relationship between God with form and his devotee. Jesus and the apostles, Buddha and his disciples, Sri Ramakrishna and the 16 swamis, the monastic swamis that came from him. So that's the relationship between Ishvara and Jiva in the most pronounced and obvious form. So then from that you see, I should make myself cut in the image of God. I should act more like Christ, like Buddha. I must be Christ-like. I must be Buddha-like. I must admire and love Krishna, so I must become like him. And so Samipya, Sayuja, Salokya, and Sarupya. You see, I must be like his form, Sarupya. Samipya, I must become dear to him, so he'll love me always. And Salokya, I must be in the same loka, or realm as him. That means open up some nadis that are going to flow into that loka where he lives, where he exists, the level of Ishvara. And Sayuja, get liberation into him. So those are the four great, as far as the Vaishnavas put it, the four great boons or practices or blessings that one has when one makes oneself one with Ishvara. So anyway, the sweetness of bhakti and devotion and its high-mindedness, not just for experiencing bliss, but for also experiencing higher wisdom, because who can look into the Gita and just say, oh, I love Krishna just because he's blue, or because he has peacock feathers on him and he has nice clothes on. You can look into the Gita and you're going to find out that Krishna is full of wisdom, and that wisdom destroys ignorance. And you're going to love that just as much as you're going to love love. Wisdom will make you love love more. So all of that comes forth from a question like this, whether it's from the station of Ishvara or from the station of Advaita Vedanta. Is that oneness cut in the image is obvious to those who with eyes to see. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. You can't see God with these eyes, you need love eyes. You can't hear Om or God's voice with ordinary ears, you need love ears. So that's how the human being cuts himself in the image of God, him or herself in the image of God. All right, those are 3 questions we took. Very good ones too. Thank you for sending them in. Now here's some other questions here. Might not be able to get to all of them this Tuesday, but I think next Tuesday we also are here with you. So send in your questions and I'll do my best to answer them in this medium. Here's one about karma. It's always a good subject to look into, karma. Is there some way to roll karma that has reached the agami phase back into the sanchita phase and closed the gate. The student or devotee here is talking about agami karma meaning future karma and sanchita karma meaning past karma. So this karma is coming out of the, that is, karma means the effects of things we've done in the past, of things we've thought, of lives we've lived. That's all cause some sort of reaction. Just like if you drop a rock into a puddle, then waves will go out. There'll be a reaction. So you've come down and you've taken on a body, and it's made waves here in the present lifetime, and those effects are going to have to be lived. You're going to have to experience them. Cause and effect, basic cause and effect, only mostly in the mind we're talking about, and in past lifetimes he's referring to. So agami karma, the future karma, sanchita karma, the past karma, and parabdha karma, which he's about to say here, is karma that's going on right now because of past lifetimes. And it will turn into karma in the future if we're not careful. That is, hopefully it can turn into good karma, but even good karma, they say, better to neutralize that and turn it colorless, turn it clear, so there's no karma at all. So further on with this question, just so we explain the terms for those people who are looking in, he wants to know if you can roll this karma that's coming up in the form of sanchita, or that will become agami, back into the sanchita and close the gate on it. He says, because if I'm right in the following, only karma that's reached the phase of parabdha karma, present karma, needs to be lived through. The rest potentially can be attenuated or dissolved. What I am basically looking for are effective techniques to roll agami karma back as soon as I see it starting to emerge. I'm looking for ways to blast my karma right at the point of emergence. In other words, any advice? So this karma that's coming forth and manifesting itself right now as parabdha, that has to be lived. So given that we have to experience certain things from our past lifetimes, and those are fructifying right now, because remember there's a fourth kind of karma called kriyamani karma, which is karma that's arising out of nowhere. It's very much connected to past karma, but it's also karma that can come out of nowhere, like beetles, white beetles coming out of the woodwork, one song in India says. I don't know where they come from. I can't get rid of them. He's talking about karma that's coming up without any apparent cause. He doesn't know how to trace it back to that particular cause. So it's very hard to see. So given that there's also a fourth kind of karma like that, and that the whole picture can be very vexing and very problematic, then what you're talking about as a solution for these kinds of things are your meditations. So you're in meditation, and you become so sensitive in your meditations that you can actually feel karmas coming up, and they're going to express themselves that day. Some people call this a premonition, or they call it intuition. Sometimes they can be of a negative kind, sometimes a positive kind. I think something good is going to happen to me today. I can just feel it. Or they feel like they're fearful, and depressed or unhappy because something's going to happen to them. And so there's that kind of premonition going on in their minds. It's as if they know karma is about to come upon them. In that regard, then, your meditation is going to be the best way to cut time down and cut away that equation so that you can nip that karma in the bud before it has a chance to fructify. Now, cosmologically speaking, when the soul comes into the body, into this lifetime, he's taking a portion, most souls are taking a portion of their past karma, and they're bringing it forward and working it out in this lifetime. It's a very rare soul that can take the whole past karma and bring it forward and work it all out in this lifetime. And we know that would be freedom. That would be freedom, the death of destruction of desire, nirvasana. There's another question here about that, which We might not be able to get to you till next week. But anyway, if a person can take all their karma from the past lifetime into this lifetime and then work it all out, then they get free in that lifetime, and that would be a Jivan Mukta, wouldn't it? That would be a soul who is free in this lifetime. He's worked out all his karma. So all of these questions are connecting nicely in that way. So to take your karma and neutralize it like that would be a very rare soul that could do that. Most of us are taking just a portion of it forward and working it out and getting free so that we can experience Krama Mukti, see? So that the next lifetime will be more and more light, and the lifetime after that will have more and more light, more and more understanding, more and more devotion to God, until finally all karmas get neutralized. He says here, attenuated or neutralized or completely dissolved. If you attenuate something, it means you're sort of evening it out, so it's not going to bother you anymore. It doesn't mean you're actually probably dissolving it at the roots. Dissolving it at the roots is probably more what the question is leading for. How can I see this karma before it comes to me and just dissolve it? I'd say chasing it back into the gate might give us the wrong idea about it. It has to come forward, and it has to be exposed to the light. The light for us is holy company. If your karmas, you're out in the world, and I'll end here because we're running out of time, I see. If you're out in the world and your karmas come up, then it's not a fun thing at all. In fact, even your good karmas can come up, and it cannot be all that good for you. Sometimes good things can turn into bad results. So you're out in the world and you don't have any touchstone, so you don't have anything to measure against. So what they want is for you to have holy company, spend time with enlightened beings and with your Sangha, and go through your life. That's what an ashram is like, and a monastery and so forth. Go through your life constantly in that company, not just in worldly life where you might go to church once a week or something, because the other 6 days your karmas are coming up and you're not in the holy company. So you want to put yourself in holy company all the time, so that as you live your life and those karmas come up, they will get exposed to the light of holy company, and they won't come up at bad times when you're not ready for them. If they come up in holy company, they're attenuated, not just attenuated, they're dissolved on the spot. You can get rid of them as you live, and you know that they will never come back on you again. So just I can say that much in the short time that we have, is that karma rolling out of that past life, those past lifetimes, is going to have to be exposed. It's going to rise up, and you want it to rise up in the light, so that it can be destroyed, and it won't. There's no need to roll it back into any gate anymore. It gets exposed. You experience a little bit of it, and it's gone. And I'll end with this. The Holy Mother said that that was the way of rolling the thread on the spool, right? You roll a thread of white, black, and red thread on the spool. That's positive, negative, and mixed karmas of your mind. Your mind is a spool. So you're doing actions, and it's rolling on the spool of the mind. When you take refuge in the Lord, in whichever way you understand that or accomplish that, the spool stops spinning and it stops rolling the thread off in the other way. And her teaching is that when the thread rolls off in the other way, you still have to experience a little bit of pain. Rolling on the thread was full of pain and pleasure, wasn't it? That's what caused it to roll and stay on. But rolling off is quick and easy. But she says you still have to feel a little bit of the discomfort. So we always meet people who are feeling discomfort in holy company because they're rolling off their karmas, and we tell them, that's a good thing. That's a good thing that you're experiencing that right now. Don't worry about the little discomfort and that you dream about it, and so forth. It's going away in the light, and it's just the thread rolling off the spool. Pretty soon the mind will be its original, pure self again. And I'll say one more thing about it. That Sri Ramakrishna said, burnt ropes cannot bind you. So if you burn a rope, you can even blow on it, and the rope will just fall apart, but it looks like a rope. So those are those karmas that are inside of you. You feel like they still are binding you, but actually they've been rolled off the thread of your mind, the spool of your mind already. So they just appear as ropes. That means you still feel the discomfort from these karmas. They still haunt you a little bit. But really, all you really need is that breath of truth, and it'll blow the form of that into ashes. So it's just a semblance. There's nothing more. Now I'm thinking of all these beautiful teachings that have been given on karma, but we've run out of time. Let's pick this up next Tuesday. Maybe start with this question and go on to other questions that you can send in. So here we will end, and please, if you're with us, say your chants, and we will see you Sunday live streaming, next Sunday, and next Tuesday for satsang. Thanks for being together with us here at our Hawaii ashram. Namaste.